It's time for Drummer Nation. At the age of 23, Los Angeles drummer Paul Kreibich got his first major gig with the great jazz singer Carmen McRae. Paul later auditioned for Ray Charles, was hired on the spot, and toured with Ray for 4 years. He became a first-call LA drummer, working with jazz luminaries Mose Allison, Anita O'Day, Rosemary, Clooney, and Konitz. His recording credits include Dianne Reeves, Bob Cooper, Cedar Walton, Kenny Burrell, Gene Harris, and many others. Paul continues to tour, record, and perform locally. He's now on the music faculty at Cal State Fullerton and teaches privately. LA drummer Paul Kreibich, up next on Drummer Nation.
Hi, this is Stanton Moore. I've been playing and teaching drums for over 30 years. My new site, Stanton Moore Drum Academy, is the perfect online drum learning platform for any level drummer to learn how to play the drums the same way I did. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you as subscribers on the site, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Drummers seeking a quick and easy way to muffle bass drums on the fly, look no further. Muffbone offers an effective way to instantly dial in your sound in just a few seconds while seated at the kit. Find out more at muffbone.com. Paul Kreibich, welcome to Drummer Nation, and thank you for doing an interview. I really appreciate it. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Michael, and it's great to be here. And we've talked about doing this, and it's so fabulous that it's finally happened. It's great to talk to you, and I've really enjoyed all your shows. I saw the Platt interview the other day about the classical stuff. It was really interesting, and so many of them, you know. And Harold Jones was a great friend and influence of mine too, and I loved his interview. He's just great to listen to. So it's a great thing you're doing here. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. I feel blessed that I can talk to so many great drummers, and also industry people too, media people, manufacturers, drum builders, dealers, the whole thing. It's all part of the big family, right?
That's right, and it's all connected, and the world's got a lot smaller since we can do things like this and have websites and blogs, and people like Adam Nussbaum. I talk to him and do Facebook, and he's not just a name on an album. You know, he's somebody I can actually talk to, and Bill Goodwin and people like that. Some of my heroes. It's so much easier to communicate right now. So
I know, and these great players are walking the earth among us. You know, we need to get to them and see what they have to say, because time goes on and we don't last forever. That's
right, and many times they're going through the same thing as you are as a player or myself, and just trying to do gigs and teach and make a living. And even though they've got such great history and connections with the giants of music and jazz and everything too.
Did you ever see the movie New York, New York? Well, Robert De Niro's in it, and he talks about in there, he's looking for his major chord. And Liza Minnelli says, well, what's that? He says, well, the three things. He's talking about, the root, the third, and the fifth. But he says, well, you got to have something to do with your life that you believe in, enough money to live comfortably, and somebody to spend your life with. And
that's right.
If you can get those three together, and most people don't realize that these artists that, we love and respect, and they're looking for their chord too,
That's true. You want to hear that big ta-da? There it is.
Now, I don't know if you remember when we first met. I was living in L.A. in the mid-'80s. I think you had just gotten off with Ray Charles or something. And we were subbing on some of the same bands. I'm not sure we actually met. We spoke on the phone back then. But I've been aware of you since then. I looked up some of your information. You kind of grew up in Los Angeles. And at age 23, you got the gig with Carmen McRae.
22 or 23, I did, and that was a great break. Ed Bennett was the bass player, and Marshall Ott was the piano player, and I'd been playing with both of them lots of gigs around LA and Orange County, and it was Frank Severino was leaving the gig with Carmen, and I went up and did an audition, and then he decided to stay on a while, and then finally he left, and I got the gig, which was...
Well, what did you learn from that? Because you worked with a lot of singers, I have Anita O'Day, John Hendricks, Rosemary Clooney, Michael Feinstein, a lot of great singers. What do you learn working with a singer, and what did you learn specifically from Carmen?
Well, Carmen was tough. She had a not a great reputation for working with musicians, and she was very kind of temperamental, and if you had one thing slightly off, boy, she would just tear it up, but she was an amazing performer. I mean, I'd done a lot of club work and all kinds of things at that point, and I worked with Vince Wallace, great bebop tenor player, and 5 years before that. That's another story, but I got a lot of chops together on that gig. But with Carmen, I mean, if you're working clubs, you have a good night, a bad night, I'm feeling good tonight, or maybe I'm rushing a little tonight, or whatever. So what? We'll do it. We'll pick it up tomorrow. And with her, is every note was perfect, and the way she sang everything was at such a high level every night. And I remember too, if her voice wasn't in a good place, she'd just sing more gravelly blues tunes and then just sing the hell out of those. So I learned just striving for perfection every time you hit the bandstand, and she would be very happy if things were going well, but if she didn't like something, boy, she would just chew your head off, and on the bandstand, or you'd have to go in the dressing room and get screamed at. it was she has a reputation for that, so but I hung in there on the gig for quite a while, and really got a lot out of it, and plus traveled all over the world. I went to Japan. We played at Carnegie Hall, did a concert for Billie Holiday tribute, where people like Joe Jones and Buddy Tate and all these people that had played with Billie Holiday were on the bill. I had to follow Joe Jones at Carnegie Hall when I'm 23 years old. I felt like Wayne's World. I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
So
well, I think most great
drummers
have had their ass handed to them by somebody along the way, and look back and see the benefit from it.
It's part of the deal. It's part of being a drummer in any band, especially in a big band, is that you're going to feel some heat. There's some people that love you or like you or don't like you or wish their buddy was on drums instead of you, and you've got to deal with the leader and the lead trumpet player and the bass player and the charts and all that. So. Yeah, and the singers are the same way. I mean, some singers are very easy to work with, and they just get up there and they have a great time. You swing away, and then some are more temperamental, and they really want very specific things every time, and you do your best to give it to them. And sometimes you succeed, and sometimes you don't, but you try to sort of figure out what's needed to be done.
Well, you obviously place a career, you put a career together by succeeding, which you have. But when you mention difficulty, you mentioned keeping a big band together, you mentioned singers, the one person you worked with,
I know where you're going with this.
You know where I'm going. He was notorious about drummers, and that was Brother Ray Charles.
That's right.
And in fact, right before he died, there was an interview in Rolling Stone, and the guy who had helped him with his autobiography called Brother Ray,
David Ritz,
was interviewing him, and he said, "You got anything else to say, Ray?" And he said, "Well, we covered it all in the book." He said, "But you know what I'm going to say." He said, Let me talk to the drummers. I was really mean to a lot of drummers, and tell them I'm sorry. Tell them Brother Ray loves them."
I saw there's a piece of video with that too, and I was sort of there grinding my teeth when I heard that.
So that's somebody who's known for crucifying drummers. Tell me about that gig and working with Ray Charles.
Well, with the funny thing is, I was on a cruise gig on the Pacific Princess, the Love Boat, with a trio, and Bobby Rodriguez was in the show band, the trumpet player. And make a short story long, he says, Ray Charles holds these auditions every year, whether he needs somebody or not, he's always hearing people. So I showed up. I went to the first day, and there was a ton of drummers, and I brought my drums up the stairs at the studio and everything, one after the other, and he didn't seem to like very many of them, and so I didn't even get to play the first day. Wasn't going to go back, and my roommate at the time said, go back, you got to do it. So I went back, and I again waited a whole day, and one drummer after another, guys that couldn't read. And it's a big band gig. You audition playing big band charts, no vocals or anything. You're just playing instrumental big band charts. So I was the last guy up. They were about ready to pack up. Brother Ray, we got one more guy. I don't know who it is. Get him up there, So then I started to play, and he could see that I could read and play big band, and was capable of doing the gig, So he came out. He was behind the glass of the booth, and he came out and started to instruct me. Well, play this, dig it on the. He would dictate a fill, and I'd play it, and he'd, I love that. That's great, And so he would start to interact with me, and it was a little scary, some of the things he's just sort of asked you to do certain things, and I did the best I could, and I think I ended up getting the gig. I think there was some actually very good drummers there that were probably better drummers than me in a way, but since I could kind of communicate with him, I think that's how I got the gig. And somebody told me, I think it was John Ferraro, who's a good friend, like when you're talking to somebody famous like that, don't act like they're famous. Just talk to them like you're
Right.
like we're talking, like matter of fact, conversational style, and just be in the moment and don't put them on a pedestal. And then I think people, they appreciate that, because there's so many people that are what are kissing their rear end or whatever, if I can say that.
Sure, you say whatever you want.
It's kind of this is advice to young drummers. It's kind of refreshing for these stars to just talk to somebody who's talking to them in a real matter of fact kind of way. So I ended up getting the gig and rehearsing a lot, and he's very meticulous. Same type of thing I was talking about Carmen. Every little detail was covered, and he had an instruction on how to do this, how to do that. Even the most simple things like playing a quarter note on the cymbal on Georgia, he had a certain way he liked to have it done. And I think it's part of his being blind and everything. He had the most unbelievably microscopically acute ears I've ever heard. He heard everything that was going on in every chart. He could stop a chart and say, third trumpet, bar 53, ding, 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 ding. It's the wrong note, hit it on the piano. And he'd be right. He knew his music really well. And I think probably the most amazing musician I worked with, although at the time, sometimes I wanted to throw a drumstick at him. But as a pianist, amazing. And I probably didn't appreciate that as much, because you think of him as a singer. And then an arranger, he knew he could arrange, and he could obviously sing really well. He had Ray Letts and 5-part harmony. And they had a hard time working with him too, but they all walked away learning a lot and becoming better singers. And I appreciate it more now probably than I did then.
Introducing the Star Festival snare drum from Gary Astridge, a handcrafted and precision replica of the rarest and most iconic of drums, Ringo Starr's 1963 Ludwig Jazz Festival. Each instrument is authorized and hand-signed by Ringo Starr and will benefit his charity, the Lotus Foundation.
We're doing a lot of these Ray Charles tribute gigs now around the country, and realized how great those charts were in the book, and what I learned, how to play simple, how to play a commercial gig and play a simple groove and stay with it, and how important that is. Because I came in as kind of a jazz bebop drummer, thinking, this is a commercial gig, but to really play the blues and play all those different styles, each one has a real essential thing you need to get into. And I learned a lot about that on that gig.
Well, let me ask you a few things about the gig itself. I've talked to other people who worked with Ray, and all that motion he was known for.
Right.
And his arms and his feet, too. He was actually conducting the band with all that, wasn't he?
Right. I mean, that's another thing. In addition to the other things I talked about, his great playing and singing, that he definitely moved his body, and you watch that left foot. When it hit the ground, that's where he wanted the downbeat. And the shoulders meant something else, and you would get a feeling of the time that he wanted. And it wasn't, not a metronome, not a click track, so much emphasis on playing with the click and everything right now. But he had an elastic sense of time. And if you're not used to it, and you're just playing with him, for the first time, I mean, he's going to tear you up, because if you're trying to just sort of keep time for him, that's not going to work. But there's a method to the madness there. Strangely enough, if you're with him long enough, you realize that some beats and stuff can be stretched a little bit, and they're corresponding to the lyrics and also the harmony. Especially on ballads, when he hits that chord, it sort of rolls into the chord instead of just having it be like on a grid. and it really feels good once you realize what it is. But you got to be with him for a while to understand that. You really got to. It's a trial by fire. It's a different way of playing, and wasn't easy because you had to watch him and keep him happy with where you were putting it. But then you got a 17-piece band that needs to have a steady beat to play their charts.
Right,
down,
and then the next night you're playing a gig with a click or something, and
Right.
It's a different way of playing time.
Very true. Yeah. Then you're trying to make the click sound like it's got a little bit more
like it's a person
life to it. It doesn't sound like a machine. So
well, that leads into another question I have about him was when he did, and you recorded with Ray some, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I did this whole album called Just Between Us, and then we did some live things over in Japan and things too.
Now I heard that he put the drums on last.
He did, yeah. At that point, he did.
That's got to be kind of nuts too, right? Going into the session and everything's there but you.
Right, and guess who's engineering? He's engineering himself, so he's doing what you're doing, with plugging in all the wires. And at that time, they had the patch board with a whole stack of hundreds of different things back and forth, and he'd be counting 35 over and 17 up, and he'd be changing the EQ that way, and he'd be running the board himself, and so he'd have everything done on these tracks with a drum machine type of thing, and then and even the vocals and everything would be done. So there's lots of different versions of the time when you're listening to the music, and he'd have a click track. And I remember one time he said, "Oh, honey, there's not going to be any click on this because I used the click track for one of the background vocals." Ha 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 ha. So you're playing into the fat of the music with no click and trying to play some time on a cymbal or something. It was difficult. Sometimes we had to kind of stop and spoon feed it. But it was interesting. Yeah, it's sort of drum sweetening, which people do a lot of these days. And it's not my favorite sound, but you try to make it sound as organic as possible based on that situation,
Well, let me move on to some other musicians before I ask you about your teaching and stuff like that. I'm looking at the list of saxophone players you've worked with, and it includes people like Ernie Watts, Phil Woods, Ken Poplowski, Scott Hamilton, Lee Konitz, James Moody, Bob Cooper. Man, oh man. Let me ask you about a few of them, just to throw some names out at you for a response. Bob Cooper.
Oh, Bob Cooper was great. I ended up playing with him with Conte Candoli, and also with Frank Strazzeri's group called Woodwinds West, which was a great 3-saxophone group. You had Bill Perkins, Jack Nimitz, and Bob Cooper. So
Strazzeri's a piano player.
Strazzeri's a piano player. He was one of the great unsung heroes, and so I remember Bob Cooper when I was around LA was like such a famous figure, and I was married to June Christie. He was like a legendary figure, and then I finally started to get hooked up in LA, and I started to get called for a little gig here and there with Bob Cooper, and it was just wonderful. Sweetheart of a guy, definitely coming out of the Lester Young, really swinging warm tenor sound, and it was just a real honor and privilege to play with him. And then I ended up getting called, this Bob Cooper Conte Candoli quintet. We would work gigs here and there with John Lydham, now Jennifer Lydham, and the piano player from Ross Tompkins.
Ross, yeah, okay.
I'm working on my jazz.
From the old Tonight Show, yeah.
Right. So that was a group that played a lot, and we ended up doing later on a live recording down at the one of the Ken Poston things at Newport Beach, and it turned out to be I think Bob Cooper's last recording, or one of the last ones. So they used it. They put it out as a CD, and well,
there was some Shelley influence in there, right?
Big time, yeah. I love Shelley, and I met him when I was a young drummer coming up, and I'd go out and hang out at Shelley's Manhole, the one on Cahuenga, and Shelley would be there, and he'd talk to me, and man, he was just so sweet and warm to everybody. A real great guy, and I'd hear him play there, and then he had when that closed down, he had Shelley's Manhole at a Chinese restaurant. I went there. I remember hearing Bill Evans Trio with Marty Morell and Eddie Gomez. It was great. And Shelley did some clinics, and I went to Orange Coast College and was in the jazz program there for a few years, and Shelley came out and did a clinic there. And I remember when I did that festival out there when I was in junior high school, and he was one of the clinicians. And he said, the drummer has good sound, but the bass drum's too loud. So,
well, there's another lesson learned.
11 or 12 years old, so that was the start of it.
All right, so
saxophone players.
Yeah, the very hard-swinging Bob Cooper. Let's go to Lee Konitz. Super cool.
Right. Well, so Lee Konitz, I played with a couple of times. I played with him at the Jazz Bakery, I believe, one time, and then I did a set with him. We did a thing with Gary Foster. That's right, out at the same festival another year, the Newport thing that Ken Posen did. And funny thing about that short story is that as far as drummers go, coming from the Lenny Tristano school, okay, so the bassers, ba-doom, doom, ding, 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 they just start walking, and the drums are with brushes, ting, chicka, ting, chicka, ting, chicka, ting, and that's all you do. So that Lenny's and Warren Marsh, all those heads were all this over the beat stuff. So they wanted the drums and bass to be just like a play along, like a metronome. So we rehearsed without Lee, and Gary Foster said, "Okay, that's what you got to do. Lee likes that thing, so we do that." And then we're doing a radio broadcast from Newport, and we do a sound check. We call off, what is this thing called, Love or something. So we start going, and Lee says, "Oh, stop. Oh, no, you're doing that thing with the walking bass and the brushes. Oh, no, I don't want that at all. I want you to just play free. Don't even think about the melody at the time. I just want your colors," and totally the opposite approach. And then 2 minutes later, it's, "Okay, you're on the radio." so we did. I remember Cecilia Coleman was on piano. Putter Smith was on bass. And actually, I thought it came out really good. So we were both figuring out, we're all trying to figure out how to play and change our mindset.
That's a great story.
He was great.
A lot of people don't realize how on the fly the industry is. Like, you're oftentimes put into really intense situations that the preparation was you for the 20 years prior to that. Right, yeah.
Many times it's like that, I just did a Charles Owens big band yesterday and at the Lighthouse. And we played Cold Duck Time. I did a nice chart.
Yeah.
And I know Donald Dean. We did a 3-drummer thing a couple of years ago with Donald and Quentin Denard and myself. And I said, let's play Cold Duck Time. And he had this beautiful beat that he played. So he's mixing up the cross stick and snare. And I said, how did you figure that out? He said, hey, listen, I don't know. They were at Montreux, and Eddie Harris just dropped the tune on him on the bandstand, and they made a recording that was like a #1 hit, played on the radio every day for a year. And everybody was just skating their way through it the first time, and he just sort of came up with that on the spot. And it turns out to be this iconic thing, So that happens a lot.
I'm reminded of the story where Wayne Shorter's doing a date with Miles Davis when he's joining the quintet. This is the way I've heard it. And they're playing for the first time together at Hollywood Bowl. And Miles says to Wayne in the backstage, "You know my music?" And Wayne says, "Yeah." He said, "I hope so." And then they're out on stage at the Hollywood Bowl, with Miles Davis. Anyway, jazz players are used to that. Let me throw another name at you, James Moody.
Oh, James was another privilege to know and work with James. I first met him, I believe, let me see. Okay, so I was with the Gene Harris quartet for 5 years, 95 until Gene passed in 2000. And we ended up doing a week. They would add guest artists to the group. So we did a week up in Seattle, Jazz Alley, okay? And they added James Moody. No, this was at Yoshi's in Oakland. They added James Moody and Sweets Edison. So I'm like, wow, I'm in heaven, Yeah. And you got Gene Harris on piano. It was Luther Hughes on bass and Frank Potenza on guitar. So we did a whole week with Moody and Sweets. And Sweets is just cracking us up. He was so funny, and a lot of jokes I couldn't repeat on any kind of media.
Of course.
But then that was a great week. And Moody was a great entertainer, of course. He, coming out of the old Dizzy Gillespie school, and he had a lot of funny vocals he did, and pratfalls and different things, and just playing his rear end off every time. And every time I saw him, I would see him a year later or something, he would sound different. He kept practicing new stuff on the horn. He would get all the books out by the what's that guy's, Walt, the guy from New York. Anyway, all the latest techniques that saxophone players are using, wild harmonic stuff, and he would be working on that stuff constantly. And he had a hearing problem too. He was very hard of hearing, so that didn't affect his playing at all. You had to get up right next to him and yell at him for him to hear what you're saying. Then I did a record on Mack Avenue, a couple of records. Gosh, this has got to be early 2000 or so. Styx Hooper was producing his kind of jazz legacy. The legacy lives on.
The old drummer from the Crusaders, for people who don't know.
That's right. He was producing, and they had one legend after another. They had James Moody, Teddy Edwards. It was Oscar Bashir was there, Al McKibben, Cedar Walton, Terry Gibbs, Pete Jolly, and Luther Hughes and I got to play. I played one day of this, and then Willie Jones III played the first day. I played the second day. I was there all day, 10 hours, I think. And one legend after another coming up, and John Hendricks, and just recording a tune. Hey, okay, we're gonna do Cloudburst. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go. No rehearsal, and another you got to pinch yourself kind of experience. And Moody did 2 or 3 of those tunes, so I got to be on records with him that way, and I did another week with him at Yoshi's with just his quartet with John Campbell on piano and Tony Dumas on bass. And that was just wonderful, that was just Moody by himself.
Well, let me move on, because there's so many musicians here I could throw at you. The great Scott Hamilton, who I love, Phil Woods, Chris Lee. It goes on, and that's just saxophone players. But let's get to a few other things here. You teach now. Where do you teach?
Well, I've been teaching since 2002 at California State University, Fullerton, and in Fullerton, and I've been teaching the drum set students there. They started a jazz program in 2002 with Glenn Cashman, and Glenn kind of got me on board. And he left and went back to Hamilton, New York, and Bill Cunliffe took over as the head of the department, along with Chuck Tumlinson, who retired a couple years ago. So Bill Cunliffe has been there, who's just a great guy and a
great piano,
a major musician. Yeah, and an arranger. I've learned so much from hanging out with him. And I teach all the drum set students, and then I've been doing for several years like 1 or 2 jazz combos that I lead with students, some who are the more beginning intermediate types and sometimes the more advanced. So I've written a lot of charts for different levels of jazz beginners and intermediate type stuff, and with any number of horns that might be left over, like
you also
alto saxes and 2 trumpets or something.
You also have some books. I was looking through your drummer's handbook.
Right.
That's pretty cool, man. There's a lot of stuff in there, man. Was that around is that the curriculum pretty much for what you're teaching?
Drummer's handbook right there.
There you go. And it's got so much great stuff in it.
Shiny stuff on there. That's the drummer's handbook.
There you go.
It's a real creative cover.
Well, the real book.
You got to get a good cover on it.
The real book didn't have a better cover than that.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it is. The handbook. It's basically a collection of all the lessons I've given over the years that I've always had in stacks of. I'm trying to find stuff and a lot of transcriptions of Philly Joe Jones, Max Roach, and a lot of Latin stuff. I've studied. Tony Sjogren showed me a lot of good Latin stuff. Luis Conte, and some vibes. I play some vibes and teach some basic jazz vibes. So I've got some transcriptions, many that I've done, and some that my students have done, drum transcriptions over the years.
Well, it's a very cool book. It covers so many different aspects of playing, setting up figures, playing with big bands, reading. It's got hand stuff in it. It's got a lot of patterns and styles of Latin stuff and sambas. And it's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
and then there's another one I really like called Duets for Drums.
Yeah.
Which has some, I don't think there's enough stuff out there. I used to do a lot of teaching, and I was trying to find accessible musical things for drummers. There you go. That's a great book. Now, where do people get both of these books?
As far as the handbook, I don't really have it on a website or anything at this point, but I know that the duets book I have, there's a thing called, Jeff Elwood, PayHip. It's called payhip.com, PAYHIP. And you can purchase a PDF copies, I think, for $10 or something like that. And also you can preview the whole book if you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. And probably print stuff for free.
I highly recommend it, and if you dig it, you should buy it. That's
they're fun books, and the duet book I wrote when I was working for Mitzi Gaynor for a number of years, and every time I had a plane flight, I would try to write a drum duet on the plane. So,
well, I played through some of them. They're very nice and musical. Now let's talk about, you've done a lot of recording, but you have some CDs as a leader too. Let's be sure we talk about those.
I do, and I just happen to have this most recent one. It's called Thank You, Elvin, and it's recorded live at the Lighthouse. We recorded it, I think, in 2017, came out late 2018. And just a bit of background, I was at the Lighthouse in 1972 when Elvin Jones had his band there with David Liebman and Steve Grossman on saxes, Gene Perlow on bass. And I was 17, and I was just completely knocked off my feet with Elvin and the band. And they were into the Pulse Coltrane thing and just digging in. Mm-hmm. Amazing level of energy and musicianship going on. So, and notice there's no piano or guitar in the band. So I've been working at the Lighthouse a lot over the years, and I thought, I need to make a CD again. And I thought, practically and also just with inspiration-wise, a tribute to that Elvin band would be a good thing. So we did it. We recorded live at the Lighthouse, and I think it came out really good. Nolan Shahid did a nice mix on it. And we have Doug Webb on sax, tenor sax, Jeff Elwood, who also teaches at Cal State Fullerton, and Glenn Cashman, a third sax on the record. Mostly we perform with two, but we have three different great tenor players and some soprano too, and Chris Colangelo on bass. Good. So I'm very happy with the way it came out. We got in there and just really went for it, and I'm pretty happy with the result.
Well, I'll look for it.
Go ahead.
I'll look for it.
It's a CD baby.
Right.
This thing called HearNow.com, HearNow. You put my name in Here Now, and you can preview it and order it and all that stuff. It's on Apple Music and all that.
Right. Great. I'll check it out. Let me ask you the question I ask all the educators, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room of education, and that is, it's kind of commonly thought that the industry is kind of in decline. There's not as much work as there was before, but there are hundreds of great musicians, great drummers coming out every year with degrees from universities. What do you tell these kids? Where are they going to work? And are you optimistic?
I am. I think in a way it's not that much different than it was when I came up. I sort of appeared on the scene in the early 70s. And everybody thought that jazz was dead back then. What are you playing bebop for? Well, and at the time the fusion thing was going strong. I ended up getting a 6-night-a-week bebop gig with Vince Wallace and Kent Glenn, some of these great players who were 15 years older or so. And I started working. Yes, there was a lot more opportunity to work. And when you went to school, I just went to Orange Coast College. I went to Berkeley for a little bit. The idea was, you're going to get some chops and you're going to get a gig, either on the road or work locally. And I did. I mean, there was lots of. So I basically learned more on the bandstand than I did in school. These days, the jazz experience is more in school experience. I think the student has to really desire it. They have to really want to do it. And I realized over the years that that's the way I was. I didn't look back. I just wanted to be a drummer, and I didn't think about anything else. And that was just nothing special other than the fact that That's was my makeup, and I think I worked hard at it. I wasn't a particularly incredibly talented young person. I worked hard at it because I wanted to do it. So if you put the work in, it's cause and effect. You know, the gigs, you either they'll know that you can play and you'll get hired, and also you have to go out and search out the work too, and in many cases make it happen. You know, you go in and do a coffee house gig. There's a whole little scene around my neighborhood. There are people just playing for tips, but some very good players. You know, some people that are teachers or have computer jobs, and they're good players, and so they make some gigs happen. They make CDs happen. There's other levels of the industry. You can learn about engineering your own records. You can record at your house. I'm trying to work on getting that together. Record the drums and do overdubs and that type of thing. And you can teach. You know, a lot of people go back into teaching. That's what I did too. I became a teacher, and I think that the strength of the music, in my case, jazz, but I'm branching out into more funk and different things, blues. The music is so strong that if you put your work into it, you will get effect. Things will happen for you. It's not as easy, or it's different. Let's just say it's different these days. It's not the same. You know, the things like going on the Ray Charles band and with a 20-piece band on the road and traveling over the world, or Woody Herman's band, which I also did. Those experiences are not there so much anymore. So there's other things going on. I mean, I think for drummers, learn how to groove, learn how to play in a band, and give the band leader what they need, or the singer. You'll work. There's still a lot of people doing concert tours out there. You know.
Good answer.
I think, yeah. And just the last point, you know, on that is that recording and copying the music is so easy to do right now. Anybody can make a CD, and anybody can sort of get the music for free. So the one thing that you can't fake is a live performance. You know, so I get the feeling like a live performance, hopefully, optimistically speaking, will be more of a unique thing that a lot of young people haven't seen enough of. You know, I go around to schools, they never even seen a drum set, sometimes, these young kids. So I'm optimistic about it, and I tell them, if you really want to do it, you can make it happen. You know?
Well, that's great. That's good information and good answers to all those questions, and I'm delighted to see you're so optimistic. Okay, before I let you go, what you got coming up?
Well, I've got coming up right now. I've got a tour of Alaska. Believe it or not, strangely enough, I've actually had. Looking back, just in June was an incredible month. I played the Hollywood Bowl with Maceo Parker doing Ray Charles and James Brown tributes, and my own band played out at the Segerstrom Center, the Thank You Elvin Band. That was a nice gig. We just recorded with Charlie Shoemake for a great young student of his, with Andy Martin and Kai Palmer. We did the music of George Shearing, Bud Powell, and Horace Silver, and I did some arranging for that too. So it's been a crowded month in June, but what's coming up now is I'm with a group called Nadja. It's been on and off for a number of years. That's North Atlantic Jazz Alliance, and it's a European and American group. This alto player named Jan Klevitz from Germany, and Marcus Berger plays piano. He's a German fellow that lives here and teaches. And Marshall Hawkins, a great bass player, worked with Miles Davis and teaches at Idlewild. And Jim Linehan is trumpet player and educator and recording engineer. And we did a CD quite a while back with all original stuff. So Marcus loves to go fishing in Alaska. So he got the German consul, it's called the Goethe Institute, to basically support a tour for this band in Alaska. We're going to go to several towns and fish during the day, and then do concerts and clinics at night. And I said, sure, put me on board.
That works.
So
that works.
We're going to the big towns like Denali and some of these towns I've never even, Cordova, towns I've never even heard of. So
yeah, I don't know that.
It's going to be kind of a Wild West experience, I guess.
Well, good for you.
But that's coming up. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, let's see. I just did a record with Elena Gilliam. She's a fine singer. Orange County area. We're playing at a casino in San Clemente that just started doing jazz on the 10th. And what else is going on?
You have your calendar in front of you?
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar. I'm playing with at the Lighthouse with Doug McDonald.
Oh, I know Doug McDonald, guitar
Yeah,
player.
Doug's got
Yeah.
yeah, he's got we got a CD out with Kim Richmond and Harvey Newmark called California Quartet, Califour, like California.
Four.
And so we're doing a gig, and that's a nice CD that just came out. And he does. We do these things called Jazz Marathon, where we have 2 rhythm sections. It's usually me and Roy McCurdy on drums, and John B. Williams and Harvey Newmark, and then an array of pianists and horn players. And we do like 3 hours nonstop jazz, and it's kind of a fun thing we've been doing at hotels. And they've recorded, I think, 3 of them. They got 3 CDs out, so that's another thing that's coming up. So it's I stay busy around town with little gigs and
good for you.
With singers and different things, and LACMA played that a couple times this summer. That's the Los Angeles County Art Museum series with Mitch Glickman. So there's stuff going on. It's good. I'm happy.
Well, I'm happy you're continuing to work so much, because you're certainly a wonderful player and deserve to be out there recording and gigging all around. Looking forward to seeing you next time I come to L.A.
Yeah. Well, likewise. Maybe come over to the house. We can play drums a little bit. That would be fun. I'm looking at your studio back there. It'd be fun to bang on the drums together. I always have a couple of drum sets set up here.
Well, you know what they say. A buddy of mine, Don Bennett, used to have a dealership. Says, put 2 or more drummers in a room, and before long, fun breaks out.
Right. Yeah.
I love that quote.
We get together with we do a thing called the Snarecastra with it's Jerry Califf, Albie Burke, who's a hilarious guy, the New York guy, show drummer, and Kendall Kay, Steve Pemberton. And we get together and read snare drum music, and we'll say, okay, we're going to put the click on the 16th note upbeat of 3, and just try
just to mess with it.
Sort of a stump the band kind of. And most of the time, of course, we're telling jokes and just BSing with each other. And drummers are good people. I mean, they're always kind of the spark plug in the band and the pranksters, and
They are.
Hopefully have a lot of good spirit to bring to the music.
Yeah, you make some of those drum lunches too, right? With Hamilton and Erskine and Joe LaBarbera, Roy McCurdy. I have a standing invitation. Stan, I have a standing invitation to come one day, and I'd love to.
You gotta come. Yeah, Peter Donald came to the last one.
I saw the picture.
Peter's a great drummer who's been doing. He's been a teacher for a number of years, but he had a great career on the drums and great stories. And quick story. He talked about Ron Carter. He talked about bass players, and Ron Carter's showing a young bass player how to play. He says, here's the high register, and here's the middle register, and he goes down and starts playing some low notes, and he says, here's the cash register. So and it was originally called the Jake Hanna Legend. Jake Hanna was there, and at Shaughnessy, Louis Belson, and
I've been following him a long time. I know Bill Selditz and all those guys you just mentioned.
Yeah, Bill is hilarious, and Jeff Hamilton keeps everybody cracked up. And,
he's funny.
And we don't talk about drums per se very much. It's just a lot of stories and weird experiences and road stuff, and it's a lot of fun though. It's been going on a while, and I'm very honored to be at that table with those guys. Believe me,
I kept telling Bill Selditz, I kept saying I don't have a place at that table, man. I haven't earned that. Those guys are monsters. But
I feel the same way. I feel like I just showed up at the right time at some point, and somehow you got to come up with some good material though.
Yeah, right. You got to bring it, or you're not going to be hanging. All right, man. Well, I'm going to let you go. And by the way, you do have a product called the Muff Bone that I did a live show on some weeks ago, and I encourage everybody to check that out. Paul Kreibich is his name. What's your website?
My website is paulkreibich.com.
All right, and there's a muffbone.com as well, right?
Yeah, there's 2 websites in the same area. It's a gateway thing, so you can go right to muffbone.com.
Okay.
If you'd like to go there and check the Muff Bone out and purchase one.
All right, well...
You'll be glad you did.
Indeed, I'll vouch for that. Well, thank you so much for us hooking up finally and doing this interview, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. You have a great day, and carry on. Love what you're doing.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.